Welcome to another discussion on Pluto and Aquarius, this time for my Canadian audience. So one of my, someone who made a comment made a really good point that a lot of what's going on with Canada is tied closely to what's going on with the United States. And it's such a good point, right? And it's a really good idea to kind of look at how Pluto and Aquarius is also going to affect Canada. So if you haven't seen my previous video, don't worry about it. Pluto in Aquarius is a massive transit that started this year and is going to go on until 2043. The last time, the last time Pluto transited through Aquarius is back in the late 1700s. Late 1777 to 1790 or something like that. It was a long transit, and in that time there were a lot of different revolutions that happened. There was the Haitian Revolution, the first successful slave uprising since the time of Spartacus. There was the American Revolution. There was who could forget the French Revolution? Who could forget the French Revolution at that time? There were all kinds of massive things going on, and not just in terms of wars being fought and revolutions taking place. There was also all kinds of musicians. This was the time of Beethoven. This was the time of Mozart. And I'm just skimming the surface, okay? Those are the stereotypes. In each country at that time, there were some artists, some musicians who were doing incredible things at that time. If you want to look at the Encyclopedia Britannica and look at the history of that particular era, I would strongly recommend it because there was all kinds of cool stuff going on, not just a few things. And right now, we're at the beginning of that same kind of era. I think it's wise to take a look at I think it's wise to take a look at what could be happening for Canadians as far as their economy, as far as religion, for instance, since that has such a large role in lots of different people's lives. We're going to take a look at politics, and I don't mean in who voted for this party, who voted for that party. I mean in terms of conservative versus progressive, that kind of thing. We're going to take a look at family structure. We're going to take a look at art and music and also scientific discoveries. So buckle up. I've already laid out a Celtic, and by the way, I'm using the Light Seers Tarot to take a look at what's going on with y'all's Pluto and Aquarius transit. I've already laid out my cards for a Celtic cross spread for the general economy. The central theme for y'all's general economy during this Pluto in Aquarius time is the Two of Swords. This is a choice that was made for y'all, and I suspect that has to do with the United States because Canada is so tightly tied in with what the United States does. And it's interesting that I say tied in. I don't know that you can see very well, but that particular figure is tied to those crows, and they're both cawing in her ear, for instance, making it difficult to make a choice. And I could absolutely see how that could be in alignment, figuratively, with how the United States might be treating Canada during this time. The challenge is actually not so much of a challenge, but it's potentially revolutionary, like I was saying, talking about all those other revolutions that happened. I can't do math. Was it 200 plus years ago? 300? Sorry. But I see Canada choosing to separate itself to a degree from the United States, at least from what the United States is doing. Canada might say, y'all do your thing. We're not standing in your way, but we're not standing with you in these particular decisions. It's kind of interesting. It's a choice that has been made for Canada. It's like the United States chooses a bad road that Canada's like, we're not taking part in that. In the past position, which tells me that this is something that leads up to this particular point, you've got death in reverse, and also rebirth is in reverse too. An unexpected ending and an unexpected rebirth. They're going to be forced to leave and make a choice. This is in the future. make a choice that the choice was made for them. They weren't expecting to have to make this choice, but they can see clearly. Like in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, and somewhat in this version, all those cups are presented alongside clouds, and that's suggesting not being able to clearly see the choice that's best for Canada. But in this particular case, I feel like Canada is going to say, nope, this is best for us. We're not aligning ourselves with the United States in this particular matter. It's going to be an emotional choice, too. Because that cup energy tells me that this is going to make a lot of people pretty sad. And of course, it's going to make a lot of people pretty happy, because I don't feel like this is a great choice, whatever's being made here. If we're have this in reverse and it's not upright, welcoming the transformation of one era into a new era, for instance, then I think that's kind of bad. It's not good, whatever it is. The United States is going to do something that Canada cannot be a part of, and Canada is going to divest itself in some regard. To do a trade routes, quite possibly. Not always, but some trade routes will be cut off because Canada does not want to partake with how those trade routes are run. Something about this economy that Canada is going to have to learn to be more independent, focus more on the Canadian dollar as opposed to the American dollar. And that might be a really difficult time of rearrangement. It probably will be. There's a lot about Aquarius that is difficult. Aquarius is in alignment with the planet. Its home planet is Uranus. That's just a whole lot of upheaval, and I can see how a lot of Canadians aren't going to like it. It could be more difficult to travel for Canadians to travel across the border to the United States. I feel like I've never been to Canada, I've never crossed the border, but I wonder if it isn't going to become more difficult, because right now it feels like it's pretty easy, right? Just show your Canadian passport, go through, and then come back. And I don't know that it's going to be easy. Americans could be fleeing to Canada because things could be so rough in the United States. And I kind of saw in my reading for the United States that there were going to be some radical changes to how artificial intelligence runs things. And it's not that it's not that Canada won't be using artificial intelligence in their jobs. They will be, but they're going to be much more concerned with human welfare than the United States will be. The United States is all about the bottom dollar. If humans can't keep up with the robots, if they can't do what the robots do, then they just get rid of the humans and they buy more robots. And I've heard that before. I knew someone who knew people who worked at a local Amazon warehouse. And one of the things that they said to their warehouse workers was, if you can keep up with the robots, the picker robots that pick your items, you can keep your job. And I think that the United States is just going to see more of that. And that might be where those trade routes kind of break down, and that might be where Americans start to run up to Canada, because Canada's going to take a much more humanistic understanding of the juncture between artificial intelligence and the economy. They're not going to ask robots to do things that humans can do just fine. They're going to be more kind to humans, and they're going to be looking at artificial intelligence with more wariness. And I see Canada kind of being attacked for this. This is in the conscious position. This isn't going to be easy, because upright, this figure is in a calm, zen, peaceful state, in spite of the fact that there are wands against her. And in reverse, it's going to be kind of difficult to resist the United States really pushing Canada around as far as, you need to adapt to our way of doing things. Canada's, I feel like, eventually here with this choice, they are going to leave Canada. They are going to leave the United States in regards to some things when it comes to jobs and the economy. But that doesn't mean that it isn't going to be rough divesting themselves of this. With the Queen of Cups in reverse, this kind of suggests that this is going to be a rough choice, in the sense that it's going to need to lack some degree of compassion in order to protect Canada. Canada is going to need to protect its borders. And there are, as far as I can see, a lot of deeply compassionate Canadians out there who might feel really bad that Americans are in such bad straits. Like, on an individual level, individual Canadians will feel bad for individual Americans who are going through some real shit. And they would like to see those Americans doing well, but the Canadian borders are closed. It's just interesting that I say borders. You've got this line of water, and I know that you don't go over like a river to head over to Canada, but I'm getting like that kind of that sense of compassion. There's going to be a sense of harshness in order to protect Canadians, Americans, and American culture. When it comes to the economy, is going to need to be blocked out. This is the Ten of Swords. This is going to be a recovery from a betrayal, in the sense that the United States may say, well, fuck you. And Canada may have to say in return, fuck you too. When it comes to trade routes, for instance, when it comes to possibly there might be some individuals who cross the border into Canada to work their jobs and then cross back over to their homes in the United States. There's going to be stuff that is really rupturing when it comes to the economic relationship between Canada and the United States. That's going to be rough. The recovery from this betrayal is going to be rough. And yet, the choice to divest themselves and leave is going to be ultimately beneficial for Canada. Canada's going to be dancing quite literally, seen in this card, dancing to the beat of its own drum. They're going to be doing some new things, exploring new options as a result of this beginning of the end of this kind of economic partnership between the United States and Canada. I'm not saying that's not going to be rough. This says it's going to be rough. That's going to take a long time to recover because Canada is so dependent on the United States for I just heard tourism. It might be that Canada sees a dip in tourism to some degree. Definitely going to close off their borders quite a bit to people who want to travel and become immigrants, but just travel in general and visit. They're going to become much more closed off because right there in the environment card is the Hermit. Quite literally, not in isolation, but definitely in solitude. Self-immolation? Just not quite, but some people will feel like this is killing us. Canada, what are you doing? United States, what are you doing? So not literal setting Canadians on fire, but it will sure feel like Canada is shooting itself in the foot by divesting themselves of whatever mistakes the United States is doing as far as their economy. Self-reflection. Canada's going to be doing a lot of thinking of, okay, what now? Our closest, largest ally is no longer our ally in the way that it was. How can we get to this point? I do see this being the outcome, and that's great, but there's a cost to it. Let me plug in my computer. Hopes and fears comes in the form of the King of Swords. And that tells me that there are going to be a lot of politicians who have to work through this on their own. It's going to be really hard work. You're going to see a lot of prime ministers. I don't know. I'm ashamed. I don't know enough about y'all's politics, but there are going to be politicians who have to make some serious choices to bring things back in alignment for Canada and for Canadians. A lot of lawyers are going to be involved. New laws, of course, are going to be passed protecting Canadians. Babies? What about babies are going to need to be protected? Going to be given new rights of citizenship in the United... What? Something about babies being given rights in being guaranteed. Oh, maybe Canadian babies born in the United States being given certain guarantees about being able to come back and still, like, live, work, that kind of thing in Canada. Because it might be that these guys are afraid of things getting worse, that their allyship with the United States could get worse. And if there are Canadian families who have children in the United States, for instance, and they want to come back, those folks are going to make it easier for them to live their lives comfortably in peace. Calling back their people, if there were any Canadians living in the United States, they're going to be not summoned, yes, they will be summoned back, encouraged strongly back, because things will be taking a sharp turn towards harm towards humans here in the United States when it comes to the economy. Jobs are going to go away in the United States. Computers are going to replace a lot of jobs, and there's just going to be a whole lot of turmoil, and Canada is not going to want to see their citizens go through that, and they're probably going to strongly encourage them, invite them strongly back by saying, look at these gorgeous jobs that we have. We're not using robots. We're not using artificial intelligence to replace your job. Don't you want to come back? And it might be that some Canadians who formerly had jobs in the United States might be squeezed out of those jobs because a computer replaces them. And Canada welcomes them back with open arms. The humanistic country might be a phrase that you could hear. I should say a slogan that you might hear for Canada to advertise their citizens coming back. And keep in mind that their borders are going to be shut towards Americans. They're not going to want Americans past their borders, living, working. No, not at all. I'm sorry. Well, Canada, I'm happy for you. I'm sorry that us Americans and us Canadians, won't be able to get along as well in the future. That kind of makes me sad. I would love to visit Canada. I just see all kinds of, and I know it's tourism, but I just see all kinds of pretty cities, pretty countryside, wilderness, and this kind of makes me sad. It will. I just heard my guide say, it will make you sad, and it'll make a lot of Canadians pretty sad too. It's the end of an era. Let me pause, reshuffle, and we'll get into specifically what we have in terms of jobs for Canada. I have reshuffled. I've laid out 4 cards to talk about y'all's jobs. And once again, we've got this walking away from, being forced to walk away from something because a tower moment happened to somebody else, not to Canada. I keep wanting to say Canadian land. I think something's going to happen to the United States. It's going to force the Canada to walk away to protect its own people. I see the 4 of Wands in reverse. The party's going to end. And that tells me that good relationships when it comes to jobs, trade routes, that kind of thing, that's going to end. That's going to be really difficult. I remember there being quite a few truckers who go from Canada to the United States and bring that kind of thing back and forth. That might be in trouble. There might be a whole lot of people in Canada who lose their jobs and have to do something else. And Canada's going to help, I feel like. They're going to do everything that they can to help. Because the fallout from the relationship with the United States in terms of jobs is going to be pretty insane. And I don't know, I feel like Canada's going to kind of expect to see this from a distance, but a whole lot of Canadians won't be. It's just going to come out of the blue for them because their whole lives, Canada and the United States have been on really good terms with each other as far as economy. You know, we trade tourists, trade stuff, products, goods. Is that what they say in economy class? There's a whole lot of good stuff that Americans and Canadians enjoy on an individual level because the countries have such strong relationships with each other. That's ending during this Pluto and Aquarius, or at the very least, it's radically changing But I feel like this is going to be a really difficult, shocking end. This comes out of nowhere. This lightning bolt hits this tree, and the animals haven't even had time to run away. They literally weren't watching for this to happen. They took shelter under a tree while the storm passed over them, but then it hit them. I feel like Canadians might be able to see from a distance that something's going on, might happen to their job, but then it hits them out of nowhere, and it's just going to be a really difficult time for a whole lot of Canadians. Kind of like what I saw in that Ten of Swords in reverse for the advice position in the Celtic Cross. This is going to be something that Canadians struggle to recover from. The government's going to do a lot to help. They're going to become kind of insular as a result of what's going on with the United States, but it's going to be rough. I feel like Canada's going to keep a lot of its thoughts to themselves. They're not going to say much to the United States. They're not going to want to upset an already tenuous relationship, because suddenly Canada's going to be, one day, more beneficial to its citizens than the United States will be to theirs. Canada might have a stronger economy than the United States, might start to grow a stronger economy during this Pluto and Aquarius transit. And then after Pluto and Aquarius, once Pluto transits into Pisces, that's where Canada really starts to see a time of prosperity, where they can dream of what else they can do in the future. They're not going to talk about this, and I feel like there's going to be kind of a sullen silence between these two countries. It's going to be rough, man. I hope the Canadians who are watching this can come to a secure place spiritually, at the very least, if not financially. Definitely emotionally and mentally and all this kind of good stuff, because this just feels sad, dude. I've got my list of stuff I want to cover. Wealth distribution is something that I wanted to talk about next. I don't know, I should have done research on this. I don't know if Canada has the wealth distribution problem. I know that housing is just crazy, and guess what? That's next on my list. But I wanted to see a little bit more into how wealth will be distributed or redistributed, because the United States was going to see a lot of its wealth class kind of dissolve. And if what I'm seeing here is an indication, it's going to be rough for the United States, and Canada wants no part of it. So Spirit indicated that housing should be covered first, because I know I've heard from, even through the grapevine, I've heard of how rough it is to afford housing in Canada. There's the Four of Pentacles. I'm seeing a King of Wands, or a group of people who behave as the King of Wands. And that's in the sense of someone who knows how to take executive action, knows what to do, knows maybe not necessarily how to plan, but they know how to work with people who do know how to plan. And this is about taking action on people who've been kind of selfish when it comes to renting stuff out, when it comes to selling homes. It might be a possibility that there are laws passed that place the human experience above money. It might be that Canada gets so soured on how the United States has handled its money and how it loves money above everything else, that it just does a 180-degree turn and says, you know what, we're not doing this. This is a highly spiritual character, and just like the Queen of Wands is a highly spiritual character. So I'm not saying that it's going to turn into a religious experience, but it's going to be tapping much more into the human experience possibly than ever before. People are going to be taking action. People in power are going to be taking action against people who've been deeply selfish and have used the Canadian housing market for their selfish gain. Not doing things the way they've been done in the past, charting a completely new course for the future. Something about the housing is going to benefit the human experience, because it's going to benefit Canadians a whole lot better than anything they ever anticipated. This might be unexpected, and it might piss some people off, but I see this King of Wands really doing some unexpected things, and it might be that right now they're wondering what they can do to turn things around because they see how rough it is to get any kind of housing. And it might be that even now they're talking about behind closed doors, of course, because in reverse this suggests action not yet taken but is like percolating under the surface. These people are already talking about what they can do to make housing more equal, more fair for everybody. More community housing, possibly? No, not necessarily. For some, yes. But for a lot of other people, it's going to be like floors and ceilings when it comes to prices and rent. Like if it's this square footage or this square, or I don't know how you guys measure your houses. Square footage is how we measure ours. Such an American, right? But they might say you can't go above this for this amount of this square footage, for instance. Something along those lines. Are going to work really hard to make it more equal and better, make it easier for Canadians to grow wealth, even if they are working class Canadians. They're going to make it easier for them to have comfortable lives. Maybe not like super wealthy, but it's going to be easier to afford costs in Canada because there's somebody here who deeply cares and doesn't mind charging forward and taking action where action needs to be taken. Kind of a badass thing. This is percolating right now, I feel like. People have gotten tired of costs spiraling out of control, and Canada's leaders are saying we agree. Let's talk about wealth distribution. I'll be right back. So after shuffling, I have the Nine of Wands in reverse. That tells me about defenses being breached. Canada just grabs an opportunity, right? Here she's kind of being meh, being kind of blasé about taking this opportunity, but in reverse, that suggests that she grabs it to me. Defenses are breached. I feel like these are symbolized by the wealthiest in Canada who should have emotional experience. They're older, they're physically mature, but mentally, emotionally speaking, they're not very mature at all. And this might be forcing them to leave their wealth behind, for instance. Canada might say, it isn't right, it isn't fair, it isn't equal that you have this much while so many Canadians are struggling, again, during that time of recovery with that Ten of Swords in reverse. It's going to take time for Canadians on an individual to recover, and I wonder if the wealthiest Canadians are going to be asked to leave the country, not entirely, but leave resources that have made them so comfortable behind and donate them, or have them forcefully seized in order to make Canadians the mainstream Canadian, more comfortable. Seized is a little bit rough, but it might happen to some who resist. I feel like the wealthiest Canadians are going to be strongly encouraged to donate instead of be taxed by the government. There might be a campaign, maybe not. Might be a campaign to just the wealthiest Canadians, like, don't you want to tap into your heart and give to your less fortunate Canadian? And there might be kind of a patriotic effort in the sense that we need to pull together and we need to survive this together, and rich, wealthy Canadians, we cannot do this without you. Don't you want to be a cool king who taps in to their heart, taps into their emotions, and gives of their own accord? And I'm seeing this kind of catch the wealthy, rich Canadians by surprise. And a lot of them don't have the emotional maturity to handle the idea of giving what's made them so comfortable. Even it's just numbers for them. Like for those folks, it's the numbers have long been detached from this buys me food, gas, housing, stuff like that, for instance. It's so far in the future that it's not even a thing for them to think about. But Canada's going to try to tap into those people's emotions and get them to a place where they give freely and start to redistribute the wealth. But I feel like a whole lot of this is going to be taxed away from those folks. Again, that patriotic front is going to be really important to getting those wealthy folks to act, but getting Canadians in general to work together to survive this kind of it will be cataclysmic for Canadians. It's not necessarily going to be worse for Americans right during this transit, but later on it's going to be catastrophic for Americans. And I don't know if that makes any of my Canadian audience members feel any better. There will be catastrophic consequences for the United States in forcing Canada basically to make a choice and go their own separate way. There's going to be consequences for that. And how many times have I said this makes me sad? What's next? Oh, we have art, film, and music. So let's take a look at what y'all's art, film, and music scene's going to look like. I've laid the cards out in a Celtic cross formation once again. I have, as the central theme, the Ace of Swords. It's in reverse. No new changes, nothing new, no higher aspect to art, film, and music being reached here, because I feel like here's kind of the challenge. The culture's pretty happy with how things already are. They don't feel the need for change, seen right here. They're perfectly happy with how things are, and this might be kind of a sad thing because Pluto in Aquarius is a really unique opportunity for all kinds of new, think about having a Canadian Beethoven, a Canadian Mozart, for instance. Canadian artists coming out of the woodwork when they're young kids and presenting these beautiful pieces of film, of paintings, sculptures, content, if you want to look at it that way. That potentially is a unique opportunity being missed. I'm seeing that there's kind of a lack of money here, that things are out of balance, and that might be kind of what fuels this. It might be that Canadians are so focused on the economy and how things are kind of spiraling out of control with the United States, with their alliance with the United States, that they're like art, music, film, who gives a shit, right? We've got bigger fish to fry, basically. And that's kind of a mistake, because there's all kinds of beautiful things like art, music, and film can lift souls up in ways that getting a good job or coming home after an honest day's work, we need art, we need film, we need good music, for instance. And I'm kind of seeing with the Queen of Wands in reverse that no, this is the future, like no action will be taken, because I feel like it'll be difficult to tap into emotions, quite possibly. It feels like they're going to be taking action towards other things that have nothing to do with art, film, or music. It's kind of rough. We'll talk about how the future could change if individual Canadians choose to make things for the better, chooses to turn things around for the better. But culturally, I don't think that Canadians are by and large going to give a shit about art, film, or music during this era. Consciously speaking, the Lovers are in reverse, which ties into, no, we're not making beautiful things together. We're concentrating on other things. If someone does make something beautiful, it's going to be kind of separate from the group. It's going to be something that's kind of individual, and it might not be widely celebrated. It sucks. And this is such a pretty card, too, and it's in reverse. I wonder if people aren't going to kind of think of beauty as being this stupid, frivolous kind of thing that nobody has time for. And it's a missed opportunity, because here we have, here in the page, in the subconscious position, the Page of Cups. This is a major missed opportunity to reach hearts to possibly, it'd be really nice if Canada could find a way to use art, film, and music to encourage this patriotic front, and not just say, hey, we need to get out of this, and the only way we can get out of this is through pentacle energy. No, like, there's some real potential in tapping into the emotional aspect that would be most beneficial, would do a whole lot to unify people and lift up hearts and souls. Something that pentacles can't always do. They can't, not by themselves. When everything's in balance, that's where things are good. But I don't know that there's going to be much cool stuff happening on this particular front for Canadians, and I'm sorry. In the advice, you have the Knight of Cups. Go seeking art, film, and music, and it might not necessarily be within Canada's borders, but if it is, I'm hoping that there are some Canadians who can do some cool things, who can tap into this energy and offer their hearts to Canada. It is possible to turn things around. It is possible to cause her to take action towards encouraging this kind of thing. Seen here with this being in the outcome, the world transition into something cool and new, the completion of a phase. It's absolutely possible to be in this energy, but in order to do that, I'm wondering if individual Canadians aren't going to need to offer up their art, in a sense, to lift up other Canadians and help everybody get through a really difficult and sad time of betrayal by the United States, basically. The environment is all about strength. It's also about gentleness and compassion, and about opposing forces understanding each other on a deep level. And again, the potential for a revolutionary art, music, and film scene in Canada is here. The potential is here, but will people take it is the question. It's a really good idea. This is in Hopes and Fears, by the way. It's a really good idea to take what the universe is offering as a unique opportunity. Even pain can bring us really cool things if we allow it to do so. And as a culture, it's possible, it would be great if Canadians could uplift the rest of their culture, enhance that patriotic front, and listen to what the universe is guiding them to do when it comes to producing beautiful things that uplift other souls. So we'll see. Unfortunately, I don't know. I need to learn more about Canada before I say anything about that. But I don't typically think of Canada as being where the art, the music happens, right? Like, there are some things that come out of Canada, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but Beethoven and Mozart were not Canadian, is what I'm saying. I know that there are a lot of wonderful artists, musicians, and filmmakers who do wonderful things in Canada. I just like to see more of this. I'd just like to see more of this idea of this is a unique opportunity, this is a unique transit. Let's take advantage of it and see what kinds of good things we can put out there for others to see. Okay. We've got religion next. What changes in religion are we going to see? In past Pluto and Aquarius transits, Protestantism came to be a much stronger force than Catholicism, and Catholicism had to really compete in order to stay in the culture, because Protestantism was just on fire and taking people away. Catholicism lost a lot of power because Protestantism came onto the scene, and that was because of a Pluto and Aquarius transit, I believe in the 1500s. Let me shuffle and I'll be right back. I've laid out another Celtic cross. This is kind of interesting, and it's kind of in alignment with things going to shit as far as economic relations between the United States and Canada. In reverse, you have the King of Pentacles, and that's the central theme. People are going to be losing a lot when it comes to wealth, and that's why there's going to be so much of a focus on the human experience, on wealth distribution. Sorry, I was looking at a possible tornado. I'm in Texas, so that's kind of the kind of weather we have all the time. I'm sorry. So when people aren't in a position to make themselves physically comfortable anymore, they kind of turn to things, to higher powers, if you will. And I said religion and not so much faith, because you can have faith but not be a part of a religion, and you can be part of a religion and not have any faith at all. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like religions, as far as like Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, that kind of thing. And I see people feeling like they have to turn to a higher power. And this is what's assisting them. This is the judgment card. People are going to choose to listen to those higher powers and choose to work on their spiritual aspects. This is a really cool thing in that regard, because everybody could use a little bit more spirituality. But what makes me sad is that it's happening because the economy is going to be so shitty for so many Canadians. They're going to need something to grasp onto, and it's good that they're grasping onto the spiritual aspect. That's kind of cool. I'm hoping that it's like a positive, and it's not turned into a negative in the sense that it could be turned oppressive, right? I'm concerned about like theocracies. I'm concerned about the United States turning into a theocracy, and that's kind of what I'm afraid of. But I don't know that's going to happen necessarily. Knight of Pentacles in reverse. Money's at a standstill. No progress being made. And that might be what forces people into realizing, hey, I can't be the king of my own finances. I can't be the ruler of my physical resources anymore the way that I used to be. So I'm turning to a higher power. Now, this is interesting. Normally, with the Queen of Swords in reverse, I kind of get the sense that she's filtering everyone out. In this case, I feel like she's going to be far more in her emotions, seen in that locked cup right over here. Locked behind bars. I feel like that little door is going to be open, and that she's going to not be holding a sword as much as she will be also holding the cup. Possibly sword and cup in both hands, for instance. She's going to be much more emotionally open, still thinking, but not nearly as much. She's going to be feeling her way through situations. I wonder if more Canadians are going to be kind of shutting down the clouds in their mind, and they're going to be feeling more than they will be thinking. Not a bad thing necessarily. I feel like there's going to be much more of a giving nature, again, tying into that spiritual, religious faith aspect. That there's going to be a era where Canadians give a whole lot more than they take. There's going to be a sense that we do need to uplift our fellow human, and some might do it in a kind of religious context. You might see a lot more religious groups giving to Canadians in need alongside the government in this particular case. And here we have that Ten of Swords again. That's in the future. The future is going to be recovering from this deep betrayal from the United States. The United States made a choice that Canada cannot return from. The choice was made for them, and it hurt. It hurts. It will hurt. And so there will be a recovery process, and a lot of Canadians, not everyone, will turn to the more spiritual aspect as opposed to turning away from it. There won't be much to turn away from. There's the Two of Swords once again, alongside the Ten of Swords. This choice, what people are going to need to do is accept that the choice was made for them. They cannot go back. The Tower moment happened, and now people need to recover from the betrayal, and they need to tap into their deeply intuitive, highest selves. There are going to be quite a few people who turn to higher powers, maybe not necessarily to ancestors and guides, the universe the way that pagans are accustomed to, but definitely a sense of turning into spiritual guidance that's going to be assisting them through this time of recovery, because money sure isn't going to satisfy here. This might be the first time, I need to look back at the footage, but this might be one of the first times that I've seen pentacles in a reading when it comes to the economy, for you folks, when it comes to the economy, okay? Choices already made, you can see clearly your way forward, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of deep pain attached to this particular choice, because it wasn't a choice that Canada would have made for themselves. They would have picked differently, and so now they're going to have to accept the choice as it's given to them and proceed forward and make the best of it that they possibly can. It blows, dude. I see a whole lot of spiritually minded Canadians kind of being afraid to move forward in some ways, because change is scary. And that's something that I saw a whole lot in previous spreads, is that this is scary, and at the same time, they're going to be running forward. They're going to hope for a place where they can run forward. Afraid to run forward, really, really want to run forward. There's kind of some issues with making progress when it comes to new ways of thinking, exploring new ways of thinking. Spirituality will help a lot. Patriotism, concern for fellow Canadians will help a lot. But this is just going to be a new way of thinking that a whole lot of generations of Canadians have not been accustomed to. I don't know that there's a generation of Canadians alive who remembers when were United States and Canada not allies, right? Like, what time in history were they not? This is going to be exploring a whole new way of thinking for a whole lot of Canadians, not just feeling their way through, not intuiting their way through this particular transit through the next several years. We've got political structures next. That's conservatism versus progressivism. Let's take a look, okay? So let's take a look at this Celtic cross. In the center, you have the Nine of Cups. People are going to be pretty happy with the progress being made, even though it's quite a bit of work. It'll take a lot of inner strength to move things forward, and I'm saying move things forward towards progressivism because in the past, you got the wheel. Change was forced upon you, so how are you going to respond? Change happens whether we want it to or not, and I feel like what will happen between the United States and Canada is going to be pretty rough, and so I feel like Canada is going to move forward towards progressivism, possibly in opposition to the United States, which might move backwards towards conservatism. Let's go back to how things were, and Canada's going to say, there's not much good stuff about the good old days. How can we move forward in a way that benefits humans? How can we be compassionate? How can we be gentle and kind towards people who are different from us? This is about, again, two opposing entities in this case, between conservatives and progressives. And I wonder if there isn't going to be an accordance, again, that patriotic front where how can we work together, because we're all being hit right now. How can we work together? There might be some conservative Canadians who are not told to leave, told to leave by their neighbors. Like, hey, if you're not going to join us, if you think what the Americans are doing is good, then go live with them, for instance. That might be a thing. There might be some conflict, some low-key individual conflict in that department, but I don't see war like we might have here in the United States during this particular era, like between conservatives and progressives. I don't potentially see that here with Canada, more leaning towards progressivism. And few characters make progress than the King of Swords. He is all about thinking about how to move forward. In reverse, that would suggest moving backwards. But not in this particular case. He is sitting on a mountaintop, looking around for the new things that are going to come flying into him. All about ether, all about guarding the progress of the future. That indicates to me some politicians are going to be involved when it comes to progressivism. And doesn't that surprise you, talking about political structures? But there are going to be some politicians who really move things forward towards happiness for all Canadians and not just a few. You've got the Nine of Pentacles in reverse. they're going to be politicians who want to make things better for those who could have wealth. Although I'm hearing that wealth distribution system again. Some of that progressivism might really push that wealth distribution system along and give to less fortunate Canadians, because y'all are going to need it from what I can see. Y'all are going to need to be unified. You're going to need like wealthy, poor, working class, upper class, middle class. It's not going to matter. You're all going to need to work forward together in order to make the nation work in y'all's favor. And that's going to make some wealthy folks unhappy. They're going to want to keep things for themselves. Some of them are, and some are not. Plenty are not. In the future position, you have the Five of Cups. That's about moving forward from your regrets. We need to turn things around for Canadians, and we need to move forward into the future, understanding that there are a few cups that haven't been overturned, and we need to stop sitting in grief and regret for the past with what happened with the United States, and we need to go forward with what we do have left. There are 3 cups that haven't spilled, or 4, excuse me. There are 4 cups that haven't spilled over. So I feel like a lot of Canadians and politicians are going to be saying, you know what, we've lost a lot, but that doesn't mean we've lost everything. We still have each other. We need to see what we can do to make every Canadian's experience better. And maybe we can turn things around. Maybe we can not ignore an opportunity to move forward, and maybe we can learn to work together. This is in the outcome. If Canadians can move out of their grief for what will happen with the United States, they can turn this opportunity. They will avoid missing an opportunity. They will take it instead, and they'll grow something new and beautiful out of it. Not saying it won't be difficult. It will be. But with the environment card being a 3 of Wands, I think that there are going to be some really cool rewards coming in because Canadians choose to do that. Because Canadians choose being progressive than leaning on the past to tell them what to do. The past, especially during a Pluto and Aquarius transit, doesn't always help for a lot of different things. Uranus is all about shaking things up. Aquarius is all about shaking things up for the benefit of the human experience. And it's absolutely possible that Canada chooses progressivism and chooses to be quite opposite to the United States. There could be an American politician who tells Canada, go fuck yourselves, do your own thing. And I'm wondering if that won't be the 45th president of the United States coming back. Or at least one of his followers, for instance. One of his followers being elected to a position and tells Canada to go fuck themselves. Hopes, you've got the 2 of Cups. Definitely a unified kind of aspect. We are together. We are moving forward. We have love for each other. We can do this. We are opposites in many ways, but we each bring our own cool, unique opportunities to each other. We can share. This is highly progressive. This is highly communal even. I wonder if socialism isn't going to get like a breath of fresh air, just because everyone learns to become more concerned with other Canadians' well-being, for instance. This might be a really cool era as far as political structures go for Canadians. If you were looking forward to less conservatism, less looking back to the past for answers for the future, this might be an era where you get to be quite happy. Okay, I've got family structure next, and the subcategory of education next. So education might be less of a concern for Canadians than it is for Americans, but I think it's still something that we should cover, especially with the economy shifting the way that it possibly could for Canadians. Be right back. So I'm wondering if the masculine... This is the central theme of this Celtic cross. I'm wondering if the masculine parents or the fathers of Canada say, you know what, folks? We need to work together to make this happen. This is your central theme and not your challenge, but your benefit, working together. There might be kind of this idea that the Canadian family structure works more towards working as a family unit as opposed to working separately. Because once again, Canadians are going to be encouraged, possibly through that spiritual aspect, Canadians are going to be encouraged to stop looking at what's been lost with the United States and the allyship and with the economy and all that kind of good stuff. And they're going to be looking at the cups that are still around. We're going to have to move forward. Let's work together as a family unit. Now, this is in the future. This is the Hierophant. For a lot of people, that's their marriage card. I also see it as spiritual leadership and about guides, about ancestors, about the universe, asking us to do something differently use their guidance to become something different. And I wonder if that isn't what's going on here, is in the future, let's do something different than we've done before. Let's follow spiritual guidance, or let's follow the guidance of people who know better than us towards becoming a stronger family unit, and therefore a stronger country as a result of what's been going on. Highly tumultuous time of change. This is in the conscious position, so a whole lot of change, difficult change, if you will. Even though it's upright, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard change. This is going to be a major betrayal that Canada has to suffer from the United States, because the United States makes a choice. Canada has to just live through it. Now, this is interesting. This is the first time I've seen the Magician for Canada and this reading, but this is a deeply powerful card. I feel like the family structure is going to change for the better. I feel like Canadians are going to say, let's unify. Let's use all the tools that we have. Let's come together. We come back to that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to uplift a family. And that's possibly what's going on here, is that the Canadian government, the Canadian culture says the family structure needs to be upheld because it's what keeps us together. That's the roots of Canada right there. And things need to grow from there. And how can we do that if we don't uphold the family structure and help it become more progressive? In the advice position, you have the Knight of Pentacles. Things are at a standstill. So to turn things upright, you're going to have to follow the guidance of people who know better about family structure, possibly a higher power, possibly a child psychologists who deal with families, that kind of thing, but people who know better on how to run strong families in order to avoid conflict, because this could be a really potentially difficult time for families. Well, it will be. What am I saying? But if unity can be brought to the family structure, there's a stronger likelihood that this won't happen. But first, people need to make progress. If the United States isn't going to help Canadians, that King of Wands, the masculine parents, the fathers, need to pull things together and ask the family to work as a unit. And that means extended family. That doesn't just mean the nuclear family, the two parents, two kids, that kind of thing. That means aunts, uncles, cousins, extended family, past that even. Everybody needs to get into the boat and row if Canadians as a culture are going to do better, and it starts with the family unit. This is going to be a hard card to get away from. Betrayal from the United States, that's in your environment position. The Ten of Wands, it's going to be an uphill battle. This isn't going to be easy, but it is going to be worth it. This is in the hopes and fears position. I feel like a lot of parents and a lot of adult family members are going to see this is going to be fucking difficult. Because, again, when have the United States and Canada not been on good terms? When hasn't our economy done well in tandem with each other? This is going to be difficult for a lot of adult family members to face, and yet I feel like a lot are going to answer the call for the younger family members, just because, that kind of atmosphere will be prevalent in Canada. It's possible that a lot of adult family members will see what's going on in the United States, and it will cause them to feel a degree of compassion, kind of what we saw with that Queen of Swords in the past, with her unlocking her door and saying, let's talk on an emotional level. There might be something that really shakes up and encourages Canadians to feel more compassion because of what's going on in the United States. I feel like there's a lot of connection in the sense that we can relate to each other. And while that will be disrupted for Canadians, they're going to have a lot to learn if they choose to learn from Americans who are going to be going through shit. Let's talk about education. I'll pull 4 cards, okay? So with education, we've got the Knight of Swords running towards happiness, towards being in a happy place. So there's definitely something I see that politicians, this is the last of the 4 I pulled, that politicians are going to do to boost education and make happiness in education that much stronger. More compassion, more love, more compassion for children, and understanding that they're going through a really rough time, that their family members are going through a rough time, that their parents may not be in a good mood when they come home. Canada's going to do something to support the children of Canada, just because those people are the future. And it may be that there is some compassion for children's experiences while going through a deep time of upheaval. It's going to be just as rough on the kids as it will be on the adults, just in different ways. Kids are more emotionally intelligent than we give them credit for. They're not little adults. They are inexperienced humans, dude. And I feel like there are going to be a lot of people in charge of making decisions, not just politicians, but school superintendents, teachers, professors, who are going to see how much need for unity and compassion a lot of kids and students in general, even if they're not kids, how much compassion that they're going to need through this difficult time. How can we make things better quickly for all students, regardless of their age? That's a question that's going to be asked, and I think that that's just wonderful. So I asked my spiritual guides about scientific discoveries, and they said that there wasn't going to be much of anything to talk about. I'm sorry. It looks like art, film, and music and scientific discoveries are going to be kind of very much on the back burner, because there's going to be so much scrambling to adapt to the choices the United States makes against Canada. The United States is going to say, well, screw you then, and Canada's going to say, okay, we're going to let you go. Rough times ahead, Canada, but I think that you can do it. I see some really good potential in the future in spite of a really awful situation. I think that y'all will be in a good place if you can stick together, increase y'all's patriotism. And when I say patriotism, that's not nationalism. Patriotism is understanding that your country still has flaws, but that it's still worth fighting for. In Canada, I wish you a journey towards healing in advance of these awful things happening. I wish you a fast route to recovery. I wish you a strong economy, strong family structures, all that kind of good stuff. And I hope for a cool art, music, and film scene from you guys too. Maybe some scientific discoveries, but I don't know that that's going to be on a front burner. Okay, folks, y'all take care. I hope you have a great Pluto and Aquarius transit.